Last year, I heard about a quote from Jane Hirschfield. She said, she was being interviewed, and somebody asked her if she could, like, summarize Buddhism in 6 words. And she said she thought about it, and then she said, everything's connected, everything changes, pay attention. And that just struck me. I carried that around in my mind for, I don't know, several weeks. And sorry, I'm distracted by this little thing on the screen that's telling me about the recording. So I guess it was after that. I've always known, ever since I started studying Buddhism, and probably even before that, that everything was connected. But it was more an intellectual knowledge, it's more cognitive. And then I began to realize more deeply how everything is connected. And so a couple of weeks ago, we did a transmission of the 5 mindfulness trainings, and some of you received that transmission. So that caused me to start thinking about how are we experiencing the mindfulness trainings in our lives, in our everyday experiences. And then, of course, that led me to a connection to June's talk last week, which was about ancestors. And I started thinking about ancestors, which guided me to a place to think about how not only ancestors of our lineage, of our biological families, but we have millions probably of ancestors. And some of them we wouldn't ordinarily think of as spiritual teachers, but that then led me to the story that I want to share with you tonight. I didn't even know that Tolstoy, who's the author of this story that I'm going to read to you, I didn't know that he had written short stories. All I knew about him was War and Peace and Anna Karenina. I think I read both of those a long time ago, so I never connected him with short stories. I think of him as a very, very serious writer. But he did write some short stories. And I first saw that and noticed that when I was reading Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. At the back of Miracle of Mindfulness, Ty inserted a story from Tolstoy. And it's very enlightening. It caused me to actually begin to think about Tolstoy as a short story writer. And then I looked up, I got a lot of information about him from good old Wikipedia. And some of that I'll share, but not a whole lot. Let's look at a picture of him, Alex. Let's look at a picture of Tolstoy. The story I'm going to share tonight is called How Much Land Does a Man Need? And can you scroll a little bit down so we can see his dates? This picture was taken in 1908, which was just a couple of years before he died. So he was born on September 9th, 1828, and he passed away on November 20th, 1918. He was born to a very aristocratic Russian family. They had land and servants, and he was, he lived, it reminded me of the Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha was born to a very rich family and had kind of everything a person could need, you would think. But anyway, Tolstoy had lots of adventures. He lived well, I think it said 82 years, which is pretty good for, that time period. But during his time, after several experiences like fighting in the Crimean War, a lot of things in his life led him to become a pacifist and eventually also a vegetarian. So in this way, in the pacifist kind of phase of his life, he was very influential to Mahatma Gandhi. They even had a correspondence for quite some time, and Gandhi established a school in Africa when he was there, and he called it a Tolstoyan school. So just that, I didn't know that about him. But Tolstoy then was influenced by the work of a German philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer. I don't know if any of you have ever read Schopenhauer, but he lived in about the same time as the philosopher named Kant, K-A-N-T. Anyway, one of Tolstoy's books talks about how Schopenhauer used this explanation of self in one of his books. He explained how a complete denial of self causes only a relative nothingness, which is not to be feared. Now, that it's kind of another way, I read it, another way of understanding emptiness, which is a big topic in Buddhism. So Tolstoy was really struck by that description, and that also led him to a path of what he called renunciation, which means he began, I guess, to understand a little bit better what emptiness actually means. I want to read also some quotes, mostly from the Tao Te Ching, because there's another correlation to emptiness. So one of the things that Tolstoy wrote about, he wrote to this Russian explorer and anthropologist. I can't say his name. It's Nicholas something Maclay. He was one of the first anthropologists to refute polygenism, which is the view that different races of mankind belong to different species. And so Tolstoy wrote to him, this is what he said to him: "You were the first to demonstrate beyond question by your experience that man is man everywhere. That is a kind, sociable being with whom communication can and should be established through kindness and truth, not guns and spirits." So that's just a very, very brief summary of Tolstoy. If you're interested, of course, you can follow up. Wikipedia has lots of information about him. So let's read the story. I'm going to actually read it to you. It's short. And while I'm reading, I want you to kind of listen to the words and think about how some of these, how some of what he's talking about is related to what we know in the 5 mindfulness trainings. How much land does a man need? The ambitious present Pakholm, who after gaining even greater sorry, I want to start over. The ambitious peasant Pakholm, who after gaining ever greater plots of land, finally heard of a wonderful deal in a far-off country. He traveled to the land of the Bakshirs and negotiated with the village elder, who seemed like a fool. The elder told Pakholm that he could have all the land he wanted for 1,000 rubles a day. Pakholm did not understand. What kind of rate is that a day? He asked. How many acres could that be? We don't reckon your way. We sell by the day. However much you can walk around in one day will be yours. When Pacom expressed that a man can walk around much land in one day, the elder burst out laughing. And all of it will be yours. But there was one condition. If Pacom didn't return to the starting point by sundown, the money would be forfeited. Ecstatic, Pacom spent a sleepless night. Rising at dawn, he went with the villagers to the top of a hill where the elder put down a hat. After placing his 1,000 rubles on top, Pacom began walking, digging holes along the way to mark his land. The going was easy, and he thought, I'll do another 3 miles and then turn left. The land's so beautiful here, it would be a pity to miss it. Pacom hurried throughout the morning, going out of his way to add more land. But at noon, when he looked back at the hill where he had begun, it was difficult to see the people. Maybe I've gone too far, he worried, and decided he must begin to make shorter sides. As the afternoon wore on, the heat was exhausting, but by now his bare feet were cut and bruised, and his legs weakened. He wanted to rest, but it was out of the question. Pacom struggled on, walking faster, then running. He worried that he had been too greedy, and his fear made him breathless. His lungs were working like a blacksmith's bellows, his heart beat like a hammer. He was terrified. All these strains will be the death of him. Although Pacom feared death, he couldn't stop. They'd call me an idiot. But when he was close enough to hear the officers cheering, he summoned his last ounce of strength and kept running. As he finally reached the hill, everything suddenly became dark. The sun had set. Pacom groaned. He wanted to stop, but heard the boxers still cheering him on. He realized that from what he was at the bottom of the hill, the sun had set, but not for those on top. Pacom took a deep breath and rushed up the hill. Reaching the top, he saw the elder sitting by the hat, laughing his head off. Pacom's legs gave way, and he fell forward, grasping the cap. Oh, well done, exclaimed the elder. That's a lot of land you burned for yourself. Pacom's worker ran up and tried to lift his master, but Pacom was dead. The worker picked up Pacom's spade, dug a grave, and buried him 6 feet from head to heel, exactly the amount of land a man needs. There's so many, I think, so many correlations in there, but I'm curious to hear what you heard. Did you hear anything that reminded you of the 5 mind extremes? Which is why I gave you a copy so you could look it up if you want to. Maybe just tell me which one, the number.
True happiness.
True happiness. What is it in that one, Alex, that kind of was a clue?
Because on my mental attitude, not on external conditions.
Yeah. What part of nourishment and healing?
He was kind of consumed to have more.
Yeah.
More land. Just letting that overtake you.
Yeah. Yeah. Greed is also part of the second one. Um, um, yeah.
So,
Did you hear Lisa say that? Yeah.
In the second mindfulness training, it says, I understand that running after wealth, fame, power, and sensual pleasures can bring much suffering and despair.
I found it mostly in the second and fifth mindfulness trainings, but you can find not only correlations in the mindfulness trainings, but obviously in the Buddhist teachings. Luis mentioned the toxin of greed or craving or clinging. Pakhom definitely was greedy. And he even recognized that about himself, but he couldn't give up. He was really addicted to it.
And that word does appear in the first mindfulness training, seeing that the harmful actions arise from anger, fear, greed, and intolerance.
So this is one of the ways that I found this story relevant to our lives. Let me read a couple of the from other ancestors. These quotes that I'm going to read, just a couple, are from Lao Tzu, who lived many years before Tolstoy, many years before the Buddha, and I think people have read quotes you guys. I found a few that just seemed exactly relevant to what we're talking about tonight. This is one, this is called Chapter 9. You find it, a long time ago, I bought this little book, the Tao Te Ching, a pocket edition. And I carried it around in my pocket for a long time. So it's got lots of little markers, but these are relevant to what we're talking about tonight. He said, fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. Chase after money and security and your heart will never unquench. Care about people's approval or you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. Care about people's approval. So one of the reasons that Pakhom kept going was because he was afraid that they would make fun of him. So have you ever done that? Continue to do something that you knew was not going to be helpful, but you didn't want people to think poorly of you or make fun of you or whatever. See, even one of our ancestors from thousands of years ago, that was part of people's experience. And here's one of the ways that I took this as a kind of a remedy. The Tao never does anything. The Tao never does anything. Yet through it, all things are done. Maybe I should say, in case you don't know, the Tao is often just referred to as the way. The way never does anything, yet through it, all things are done. If powerful men and women could center themselves in it, the whole world would be transformed by itself in its natural rhythms. People would be content with their simple everyday lives in harmony and free of desire. Where there is no desire, all things are at peace. The story also illustrates that Falcone had a strong desire for more land, even though he started out apparently with quite a lot of land, but he desired more. So I love this part where Lao Tzu says people would be content with their simple everyday lives in harmony and free of desire. Where there is no desire, all things are at peace. What I like about that is not so much that I think his use of, or the translator's use of the word desire probably doesn't really reflect exactly what was written in its original Chinese. But I think it's how you look at the word desire. I think it's important for all of us to have some kind of desire to, propel us into a more beneficial way of living. So that's not the kind of desire he's talking about. What he's talking about is more that clinging, grasping, that kind of desire. Almost an overwhelming kind of energy. Obsession. Good. So I'm going to read one more from Lao Tzu. This is number 44. Fame or integrity, which is more important? Money or happiness, which is more valuable? Success or failure, which is more destructive? If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never truly be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Poor old Pacom, if he had just realized that, he wouldn't have needed that grave. I'm interested if you would like to share some experiences in your life, and I will share with you. But thinking about this, doing something just because you think it will bring you authority or appreciation or some kind of fame or fortune. I'm thinking about things that I did as a youngster, and those things are really forgivable, because when you're a teenager or a young adult, what do you know? You know nothing, pretty much. So there was a time in high school where I always found myself like on the fringes of the popular people. I wasn't on the other side entirely, but I was kind of on the fringes. And oh, how I longed to be popular, to be a cheerleader or something like that. When I look back at it now, I can kind of laugh and I can say, oh, Bobbie, oh, bless your heart. And I'm so thankful for that, because I actually learned from my own experience that it was not helpful. But it did take me a long time to be comfortable with where I am, which, it shouldn't be surprising, but I don't think it's unusual, even at an adult age, to kind of be uneasy and be thinking there's a better way or a better place or a better whatever. So, if you want to share an experience like that, we would love to hear it.
Luis Bobbie. When I was in, so I went to school to North Texas State. That's not why I'm here in this part of the world. I came here to study music in Denton. I wanted to be an opera singer. And the way they have it for a performance degree, you get to that at the end of your sophomore year, you have to pass what's called a performance jury, or something like that. And the faculty decides whether you're good enough to be a performer or not. Well, I wasn't. And what they said to me was, well, would you consider studying being an education person, being a music teacher? And I was like, moi, a music teacher? And so, I went off and got a degree in marketing, and then went off to graduate school and all that kind of stuff. And as I've gotten older, I realized I would have been a fantastic choir teacher or a band director. Those, kids, young people absolutely love me, and I love to teach, and I love music. It would have been exactly what would have suited me, but my vanity and my whatever kept me from doing what may have been a beautiful career.
Yeah, yeah. And so from that, can you now be comfortable and at ease and okay with how you landed?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's part of it.
Yeah.
Because, I'm a fundraiser. That's what I do. I've dedicated, that's my career. I've been a fundraiser all of this time. And it has been, it's been a wonderful career. And I just feel like this is how I've served. This is what I've done during my life. And it's what I've done, and I love doing it. Knowing that wherever I land is where I'm saying, what is it? Plant where you're bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
Eventually, I was like, well, I didn't set out to be a fundraiser. I just am.
Thank you, Luis, for sharing.
Neil bowing in. So I think I got the context of the question. I'm not sure how much it relates to the 5 mindfulness training, but you could help me if I'm go on. But I came here to get a PhD in 1986. I really wanted that, and I just kind of similar to your story. I got everything done. They give you tests, and then you got to write a dissertation. I had to do one of the tests over again, so I got the tests behind me. That was trying. And then the dissertation, I just wanted to do it. I was in literary studies, and I wanted to write about this poet who was a pretty avant-garde writer. And I just wouldn't let go of it, even though nobody knew about him. And his writing was so bizarre that no one could really help me. I ended up not getting the dissertation, and not getting the PhD, not doing the dissertation. It really was hard on me. I mean, I moved out of New York. I was really committed. I didn't take it as seriously as I should have maybe at the first year, but so am I complete about it? I'm not fully complete, and even though it's been about 10 years, been maybe more than that, I still haven't thrown out my research, my dissertation, all the notebooks. I got about 30. It's just like, I know I really have to let it go. But I studied for hours. I would go to SMU, and because they were open all night before UTD was, in the library, just about all night. I think they closed at 4 in the morning. I don't know. But I think it's the nature in the United States, I don't know about other countries, to really chase. And I'm still wanting to accomplish things at age 72. Working on a second book. I've published 1 book. Yeah, so I don't know. It's hard. I mean, I realize the mistakes I made by not, by by sticking with this right or not being willing to give them up. But I'm glad to be alive. But I haven't thrown out those notebooks yet.
Thanks. Nick has his hand raised.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nick. Nick, did you hear me? You're muted.
Hi, this is Avita bowing in. The story that you shared, Bobbie, what brought to mind for me was our house situation Nick and I are in trying to get rid of our house. We have a house that's too big and on too many acres, just 2 acres, and just the time that this house takes away from what we actually want, which is to be spending less money and spending more time together. When you're young, you think you want this house, you want this land, you want what this man wanted, and in the end, he died for it. So we are trying to downsize and go to a much smaller house, probably something like a retired person would want. But we see that that is more important than having a house with land. So we don't want to die for this house. And thank you for sharing, Bobbie. And I also like what you said about what did you say? I looked it up and I forgot. It was don't be a prisoner to, if you care about people's approval, you'll be a prisoner.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a Lao Tzu quote. Yeah. If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never truly be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Thank you, Avita. I was thinking about what you said, Neil. The fact that you haven't gotten rid of all the research that you did, I'm not sure that it means you haven't, that you need to release it. It may just mean that it still holds some value for you. So, I don't know, I'm just suggesting don't beat yourself up about it and find a way to be okay with it. That's all. Would anybody else like to share?
As I'm going in, keeping with the academic theme, I was doing my master's and I wanted to do my PhD, but the co-directors didn't think that I was PhD material, and so I couldn't move forward. But it later turns out that after that, I ended up in the International Rescue Committee doing an internship. And that's where I realized that I have a real talent for interpreting from English to Spanish and vice versa. And currently I'm a medical interpreter and I help people every day. And that's what I'm supposed to do. So what looked to be like like a bump in the road, it ended up being like what I needed to do. How that got me out.
Thank you for sharing that, Leon. Yeah, it's surprising. Perhaps you've noticed this in your life. It's surprising how many times what you thought would be your path got derailed some other way, and it turned out to be the best way. I've heard people who have survived really terrible diseases say it was the best thing that ever happened to them, because of the insight and the path, the things they learned about it. So what you just said makes me think about this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. We have more possibilities available in each moment than we realize. I'm going to read it again, just in case it didn't sink in. We have more possibilities available in each moment than we realize.
Can I ask you a question about?
Sure.
You've done some research in Thich Nhat Hanh. Who are his influences? So a lot of wisdom. I'm sure he read a lot. I know he went to Columbia.
He actually taught at Columbia.
Taught, right?
Yeah. He is from the Linji line, so he has ancestors from Japan. He learned how to read and write Japanese. He understands Pali and Sanskrit. He has many languages: German, French, English, Vietnamese. And so, he was quite a scholar. And so he studied and learned, whatever he could. And one of the things that I know about him, and that you probably know as well, is that he never denigrated anybody's work. He just took what was useful to him, beneficial, and never criticized, as far as I know, never criticized anything else. And that shows up in retreats and things where he encouraged people not to abandon their root religion, so that you don't get uprooted, but you kind of just branch out. Your branches move out, and doing that, we begin to see those connections. And I think that's why he taught that, because when you can broaden your perception and your view, then, like he says, the possibilities are limitless. I don't think I answered your question very well, but that's all I got. I guess we're going to be done early.
Paula bowing in. I had a pattern through my life of wanting. It kind of started, with my mom needing approval from my mom, and because if she wasn't happy, nobody was. So it kind of was like try to make mom happy, and then things are better. But that people pleasing, spread to others, where what I can distinguish now, from the pattern was then it made it easier for them to be responsible. You know what I mean? So if I'm pleasing them, then I'm doing my part, and they're not. If whatever it might have been, but I remember in relationships, with girlfriends, and I would, if something happened, and I would try, I felt like, and I grew up Catholic, so my guilt was removed because I was putting in this effort, but I was the one who was suffering. And so that, you know, over time, to be able to really realize I didn't know my needs. So to really, when you had referred to one of the quotes tonight, what is desire? You know, what's the difference? For me, authentic desire is the freedom, because you're choosing from that source that's unlimited, and that will always lead you into, you know what I mean, happiness, because you're following that truth. So learning that over time, you know, to be responsible for what I chose or what I do choose, and you know, I can see, you know, it's kind of taken different forms as it's more, you know, letting go the onion peels of the people pleasing. It can be very, very subtle, you know, that I see it now, but it's really nice to be able to return to myself and know there's nothing I need to do if someone else is unhappy. Or if I perceive someone may not approve of me, and I may not meet whatever it is that they're looking for, that I can love that part of myself that I might like to have, you know, let's just say intelligence in certain areas, and that I may not have that, but I can still love myself for who I am, and I can challenge myself to grow more and learn more rather than to get it from someplace else. So.
Yeah, that's a part of the 5th mindfulness training. I will practice coming back to the present moment, to be in touch with the refreshing, healing, and nourishing elements in me and around me.
Nick has his hand raised.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nick.
Hi, Bobbie. Good to see you. I wanted to say, first of all, that I'm glad that you made it from the fringes of popularity in high school to being the most popular person at the DMC now. So you've made it, and I'm happy to hear your talk, and I really liked the topic. And before your talk, I looked up the story and looked up Tolstoy and found a lot of inspiring messages from the story and all that. And it reminded me of an alternative in the Buddhist literature, which is pretty similar actually to the story that you told from Tolstoy, but it's kind of flipped. And in it, the Buddha is talking with Mara, who is like the tempter, or the one that brings the, kind of seen as the evil one, the equivalent of the evil one. And the Buddha is looking to build a sangha, or a temple. And he says to Mara, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw up my brown coat, and however far the shadow stretches, that's as much as I'm going to be able to build my sangha on. Do we have a deal on that? And Mara says, sure, you can throw up your coat. It's probably going to cover, 10 feet, 20 feet, and you can build your little sangha on that. And the Buddha says, well, great. And he throws up his coat, and the shadow stretches and stretches until it covers the whole world. And he builds his sangha, and it permeates through the whole world. So I thought that was a pretty cool kind of twist or rendition of the Buddha and the evil one going back and forth on that. But overall, I just really appreciate your story and your presentation. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Nick. I guess the difference there between the two things is that the Buddha had in mind the community, and Bhakam had in mind himself only. Intention. Intention goes, for me, it moves into the realm of karma, and that's another talk. It's just, I was telling June earlier that beginning to see things in this totally connected way really makes it hard to pick one thing to talk about because everything's connected, truly. And yeah, so I look to Thich Nhat Hanh for guidance in that because he has a great way of focusing on the one element that you need to know right now, and then eventually you can get a feeling for the whole thing. But when we start talking about connections entirely, we're talking about the ultimate dimension where words are just totally irrelevant. And I wanted to read this because this is funny. At the end of the book, the Tai Chi book, the Tai Chi, yeah. There are commentaries by the author, and he says, describing the indescribable, teaching the unteachable, pointing the way to the way. What does Lao Tzu think he's doing here? It can't be done, no way. So there's poetry, I don't know how it's, maybe that. He says, poet and stand-up comedian wrote, he who talks doesn't know, he who knows doesn't talk. That is what Lao Tzu told us in a book of 5,000 words. If he was the one who knew, how could he have been such a blabbermouth? That's the problem with spiritual teachers. They have to be blabbermouths. Okay. Thank you all very much. I enjoyed the talk and being with you, and I hope you